I want to welcome you all to tonight's debate between the 8th Congressional District DFL candidates. This debate is sponsored by Debate Minnesota in partnership with the Minnesota State College Student Association. I would also like to thank Central Lakes College for hosting this event. We all hope that tonight's debate will provide you an opportunity for you to get a closer look at the candidates and hear more about what they have to say about issues that matter to you. It is with that, I would like to introduce tonight's moderator and candidates. Please help me in welcoming the moderator for this evening, Lisa Paxton. And the candidates, Jeff Anderson, Terrell Clark, and Rick Nolan.
Well, hello and welcome. Thank you for the introduction, Steve. It's a pleasure to join you today. I'm Lisa Paxton with the Brainerd Lakes Chamber. Debate Minnesota's Board of Directors and supporters are from different backgrounds and political persuasions. They all share a common concern about the lack of civility in our political discourse and the impact of negative advertising and money in politics. Debate Minnesota proposes that we take a lesson from Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas and carry our issues back to the public square, where the real power lies in this nation with the people. And as with the famous Lincoln-Douglas debates of 1858, they believe that the best way to restore civility in the election process is through substantive, content-based discussions between candidates, the people, and their communities. So welcome to the Brainerd Lakes area. Our debate will begin with 2-minute opening statements by the candidates, and they've drawn numbers to determine the order. And the same order is used for the closing statements, so to ensure that one candidate doesn't get the first and the last word. Each candidate will have 2 minutes then for questions that follow their opening statements and 1 minute for any follow-up they want to make. The order will rotate throughout the debate, and it's my job and Steve's to keep track of that order. Questions from the audience will come at the end, and I encourage you to use the little forms that you received when you registered, and if you need any forms, look to the runners in the aisles. We will then wrap with 1-minute closing statements. I want to say special thanks to our timekeepers in the front row. They are here to keep us on track and on schedule, and it's my job to enforce that schedule by interrupting candidates if they run on too long. Now, I do want to remind you that all of that hootin' and hollerin' was wonderful when we started, but you can't continue that through the debate. No applause until the very end, and then all the hootin' and hollerin' you want to do is welcome. So with our first opening statement, and again, the opening statements are 2 minutes, we'll start first with Rick Nolan.
Good evening, and thank you very much. I want to particularly thank Debate Minnesota for organizing this debate and for the emphasis that you've placed on civility. Civility in our discourse and civility in our campaigns and elections. I probably hear more expressions of concern, in some cases outright anger, about the gridlock that we're seeing and the intense partisanship in our campaigns and elections, and the gridlock that has flowed from that. People are looking for political leadership that's not afraid to reach across the aisle and forge the kind of compromises that historically have been necessary to move progress forward and to get things done. And make no mistake about it, you know, the country is in big trouble. The simple truth is that the wars, the deficits, the joblessness, the unemployment, the growing inequalities are not sustainable, and they threaten our future. And the fact is that the rich in this country are getting richer, and the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class is getting crushed. And it calls out and it cries for a change in the way we do our politics. And some of it is somewhat complex. We have to take the money out of politics that is perverting the public policy process. And some of it's not so complex. I mean, the Congress works, you know, on Tuesday nights and part of Wednesday. And maybe they need to go to work and work from Monday through Friday and get to know one another. And in the process, learn more about one another, learn a little respect for one another, and learn where they can find those areas of compromise. That's what I've done all my life in elective office, in business, and volunteer community service. I wouldn't be running if I didn't think there was a great need to make change, and I believe I'm capable and certainly desirous to step up and to help make that change, make that possible, restore the dream, get America back on track again.
Thank you. We'll go now to Jeff Anderson for your 2-minute opening.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Debate Minnesota for this opportunity, and thank you to all of you who are here today listening to all of us here on stage. I'm Jeff Anderson, a fourth-generation Iron Ranger, a veteran, a businessman, an elected official in the largest city in the 8th Congressional District, and I am running for Congress too because I'm concerned about the future of our country. I'm concerned about the future of the 8th Congressional District here in Minnesota. This race is about jobs. It's jobs, 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 just like Governor Rudy Purpich said in 1982 as governor. In 1982, my father was laid off from Mintac Mine. I remember that. I remember the struggles that my family endured living on the range, seeing so many families and young people having to leave northern Minnesota to seek opportunities in other parts of the state. That's something that is very personal to me that I take with me in my public service. We need to stop that so that young people can find opportunities and jobs here in the 8th Congressional District without having to move to the Twin Cities or elsewhere for jobs and employment. We can do that by investing in manufacturing, by investing in our natural resource-based economy. And it's what motivates me in this race to Congress to work so hard to make sure that we're talking about these issues that are important for the future. The next generation of prosperity for the 8th Congressional District for Minnesota is out there. We just need leaders, the right leaders, to go out and get it. Congressman Chip Cravaack is not that leader. I believe I am, and I look forward to talking about these issues and about the role that I'd like to play in being a leader for this district throughout this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now turn to Terrell Clark.
Wanted to thank Debate Minnesota and everybody for being here today. I'm running for Congress because, frankly, I think Washington's broken. They clearly have forgotten who the priorities are. They've forgotten they represent us, families, and communities. Instead, it's been about big oil and Wall Street, about outside interests. Certainly these super PACs and all the money we've been seeing going in is a real problem. And I decided to step up to the plate when I saw Congressman Cravaack last year, not only voting for the Ryan plan, but out there pushing cuts to Medicare and Social Security. Why? So Mitt Romney and others, I guess millionaires and billionaires, could get yet another tax cut. Voting to outsource our jobs over and over and over instead of doing a dang thing to be creating jobs here throughout central and northeast Minnesota. And frankly, that's just wrong. And my life has been about focusing on how can we actually help strengthen our communities, how do we help bolster our families. And my husband Doug, who's with me here tonight, and I have spent the good part of the last 25 years working on that through these districts. For those of you who don't know me, I was born when my dad was serving in the Navy, and two of my brothers did as well. I've done a lot of work on veterans and military family issues, something I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about tonight. I also am the only one in this race who, including the incumbent, who's worked throughout all the communities throughout this very broad region. And just to reinforce how big it is, I will say I've been participating, I'm a quilter, and I've been participating in the quilt shop hop that just started on Friday. And we did 10 different stores in just since yesterday noon. And on our 16 of events for the day, it is an amazing what we have to look forward to and what we can accomplish together. Together, Doug and I have been youth ministers. I worked with the Girl Scout Council, helped start Habitat for Humanity here in central Minnesota. I worked with all the community action agencies throughout the district, and right now I'm working on a national program with the Blue-Green Alliance, and again, we could talk more about that. This is about reclaiming our priorities, and together we can make that happen.
Okay, thank you all for your opening statements. We appreciate that. We're going to start now with our questions, and this first question relates to the future of government programs. Jeff, you are going to be first to answer this, and again, the format is a 2-minute response, and then we rotate through each of the candidates with a 1-minute additional follow-up by each of the candidates. So today, 55.6% of the entire federal budget pays for entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, etc. Cher, what do you think is the future of these government programs?
Well, I believe that the future of these government programs has to be one where they continue to exist. They continue to thrive and flourish and to be there for our citizens. Programs like Medicare, programs like Social Security, these are earned. These are programs that we contribute to. And so to have leaders in Washington today that would rather give tax breaks to big oil companies or to Wall Street insiders rather than to help strengthen programs that help people who are on the fringes of our society, to help people retire in dignity, is just wrong. It's criminal. And as a representative from the 8th Congressional District, I assure you that I will get up every day and work very hard to secure and to make stronger these very important programs, which I believe are a part of the fabric of America. Can you imagine an America without Medicare or Social Security? One of the fastest ways we can help strengthen a program like Social Security is to increase the cap to which people contribute. Right now, that's just over $106,000 a year. And after that, whether you make $150,000 a year or $2 million a year, you have no skin in the game. I believe that we have social responsibility to take care of our neighbors, our brothers, our sisters, and to make sure that these programs remain strong, flourish, and thrive. That's the type of leadership, that's the type of attitude we need in Washington, D.C., and it's the type of attitude that doesn't exist with the current representative from the 8th Congressional District.
Thank you. Terrell Clark.
Let's face it, Medicare, Social Security, I'm going to say Medicaid, because many seniors, it's critically important from a long-term care standpoint. People just can't afford otherwise health care that they're needing, are critically important, and it's a big part of who we are. We've been able to bring down poverty for seniors and help people to live in dignity and with respect because people have been paying into these health accounts their whole lives. This is our money. We've put it in. People have earned it. It's earned benefits. As a former senior law attorney, as a legislative leader, as an advocate, these are issues I've worked on for the good part of 25 years. And it's something that I want to be working on in Washington. Frankly, in a lot of ways, the problems are of the Republicans' making, much like the post office, which hopefully we'll talk about that as well. You know, we know that if we can go ahead and make sure that people are paying in all year, all of us in this room, I'm guessing, are paying into the accounts every single year, every week of the year. But there's some people are stopping in March or in January, and that's not right. So that's simply the first and most important thing we can do there. We also need to be making sure, frankly, we're getting people back to work. If we have people working again, we're going to be able to have the resources coming into the accounts that are needed. As far as Medicare and Medicaid go, there are a number of things that we can be doing. We can go ahead and make sure, like the VA does, that we can be negotiating drug prices, that we are expanding Medicare. I personally support a Medicare for All system so that we're broadening the pool, we're able to reduce costs, something the Affordable Care Act did a good start on, but not enough. And you know, when I think about it, I think about somebody like Hazel, whose husband died a few weeks before I talked to her on the campaign last summer, and she was obviously distraught. We talked about her husband. I wasn't going to talk about the campaign. And then she turned the conversation to, why does Chip Cravaack want to make us destitute? Why does he want to take away our Medicare? Seniors shouldn't have to worry. And together we can go ahead and make that change and make sure it's solid for the future.
Thank you. Rick Nolan.
Lisa, is this a question about the federal budget and government programs? The same question?
The question is, what is the future of these government programs?
Okay. Well, first of all, we need to tell the truth about government spending. Social Security and Medicare are not entitlements. They are clearly earned benefits that people earned and started paying for the very first day that they ever went to work. More importantly, when we're talking about the federal government and our budget and our programs, we need to remind ourselves that neither one of them have contributed one thin dime, not one penny, to the national deficit. On the contrary, Social Security is financing a couple $1 trillion of the federal deficit as we speak. Now, that doesn't mean if you make your projections down the future, you can't make some changes. Of course you can, as was suggested. We can raise the cap on the amount of income that's taxable. Medicare, we could start negotiating for drug prices. And there's a lot of fraud and abuse in Medicare that really needs to be taken to task and eliminated. We need to tell the truth here when we're talking about our federal budget and the federal deficit. Willie Sutton once said that when asked why he robbed banks, he said, because that's where the money is. Well, if you want to reduce the deficit, you got to go where the money is. The fact is 58% of every federal income tax dollar that we send to Washington goes to these wars of choice and nation building abroad where it's not wanted, where it's not welcome. And it's time we put an end to that and use those savings to start balancing our budgets and to start rebuilding America, create jobs, improve the quality of our life. And that's how we'll get this federal budget under control. That's how we'll restore the promise. That's how we'll get people back to work. And that's how we'll restore this economy. And in the process, we're damn well going to protect Social Security and Medicare.
Okay, thank you. We'll move now to any follow-up comments. Jeff Anderson, you're first.
Well, I'd just say that in talking about the future of these very important programs, the future is shaky at best if we have leaders like Chip Cravaack in the U.S. Congress. He voted not once but twice for the Ryan budget, which would essentially eliminate or destroy Medicare as we know it and move these programs down the road of privatization. That is wrong. That does not reflect the values and the needs and the wants of the people of the 8th Congressional District. And as Congressman, I would not support that plan of attack. I would instead have that attitude where we work and do what we need to protect these programs, which are so important for my mother and father and grandparents and people all across this district and all across this country.
Terrell Clark.
Well, another quick story. I met another wonderful woman out at a high school football game, and she was saying, you know, back in 1969 when I was just a new teacher, I was told by a worker at the Social Security Administration, don't even bother because Social Security won't be there when you retire. You better figure something else out. She's obviously now retired, and that's what we've been hearing for decades. These are, again, our money. These are our earned benefits. These are pieces that are a big part of the fabric of who we are. I'm proud to have been endorsed by the National Committee to Protect Social Security and Medicare. They know that I long have worked on this and that this is not just about the budget numbers, which is something Congress forgets. This is about our parents. This is about our sisters and brothers. This is about the future of our kids. And we can make sure that these services go forward into the future, but we need to have people in office that are going to be persistent, that are going to be patient, and that are going to make sure that together we can have the resources allocated where they're supposed to be, not going for other kinds of programs.
Thank you. Rick Nolan.
Yeah, I would just add to what my colleagues have said here, and these two issues are two of the issues that really separate us from Chip Cravaack. He's voted again and again to turn Medicare over to a voucher system so that we would have to go to the insurance industry for medical care in our senior years. And they've made no secret about wanting to turn Social Security over to Wall Street. And I can't think of two more tragic mistakes that we could make. The fact is, in little over a generation, we increased the life expectancy in this country from 47 to 77. Pretty good stuff. We should all be doggone proud of that. And that didn't just happen accidentally. Social Security has lifted more people out of poverty and provided a modicum of comfort and economic success in their elder years, more so than anything that's ever been done in the history of this country. And the same can be said of Medicare. It's provided people with affordable care so that they could live with some degree of modesty and comfort and get the health care that they need. And that's why we have to preserve and protect those programs.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our next question again about the budget. Unless Congress acts by the end of 2012, America will see the single largest tax hike in U.S. history, hitting American taxpayers with $400 billion in new taxes in the first year and $4.5 trillion over the next decade. Lawmakers must also contend with the $1.2 trillion in automatic budget cuts that will be triggered on January 1st. So what are your views of how our country should address this short-term budget crisis, and your thoughts on the long-term budget and tax reforms? And Terrell Clark, you're up first.
We're still pulling out of the recession. We lost 7 million jobs in just the 2 years that were theoretically the recession. We've lost many other jobs across our country. And so job number one, frankly, is getting people back to work. And the hard part about the question is that that's the additional thing we need to be doing. In some ways, it's like when President Kennedy first took office. While there was some other issues financially that needed to be dealt with, we really needed to be getting our country moving forward. So I personally think that we need to be moving forward on a more comprehensive approach on building our infrastructure, including broadband, heaven forbid, wireless communications, and a number of other things that will get us really back on track. I believe that the Bush tax cuts for the wealthy, for the billionaires and millionaires, should expire. That should be done before the next Congress comes in session, and if it doesn't, we need to do it. But middle-class families, like we've seen in our state, have been bearing way too much of the burden for quite a long time. Now, I'm the one in this race who's worked in a highly polarized environment. We've had to balance budgets at the state with Governor Pawlenty. Whether we agreed or disagreed, we had to go ahead and get that done. And in the Senate, we came up with proposals that we could show how you could go ahead and be reducing the budget deficit without sacrificing our values. I think Congress has got to do the same thing. Frankly, there's waste, fraud, and abuse, some of the things that we know in different parts of the budget that we can go ahead and be cutting back on. But if we go ahead and scale back, take back those big breaks that were given to the wealthiest Americans, ask them to step up to the plate and give back into our communities, that will solve an awful lot of the problem. I am concerned about what these automatic triggers are going to be. I don't think they've thought through really what the implications are going to be, and that's going to happen before the next Congress comes in place. But I do know that we have got to get people talking to each other again, that we actually have to come up with solutions together and not just talk about bipartisanship. I've successfully shown you can do that.
Thank you. Rick Nolan.
You know, I begin again by we have to leave Social Security and Medicare out of this debate. They're off the table. They're not contributing to the deficits and the problems. So let's get them off the table. And as I said earlier, you know, we need to step up and put an end to these wars of choice in this nation building, in this massive military empire of ours that reaches into every nook and cranny of the earth and is costing us trillions of dollars. That's where the money is going. And we need to pull back on that and use that money to balance our budget and to use some of it to start rebuilding our infrastructure and financing our health and our education and our human development activities in this country. Beyond that, as Terrell said, we need to put an end to the Bush tax cuts and close the tax loopholes, enable the richest and most powerful people in this country to escape their tax liabilities. There again, additional trillions of dollars that we can use to balance this budget and start funding as well the unmet human and structural needs here in this country. Again, putting people back to work. And we also need, quite frankly, to change our tax and our trade policy so that we incentivize domestic manufacturing. And then we need to start putting more and more money into the things that are important, like education. Terrell, I'm sorry to hear that you're proud of the accomplishments of working with Tim Pawlenty and cutting our funding for our education. I'm on the immediate past president of the Central Lakes College Foundation right here, and the cuts have been dramatic and they've been devastating, and they create great hardships for the college and for the students. We've been embroiled in community conflicts and battles because of the dramatic cuts in education by the Pawlenty administration. They were unconscionable, they're unforgivable, and we need to start concentrating on the things that are important, like education.
Jeff Anderson.
I think it's important that we look at where we've been this past decade. And at war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and for the first time in American history, at a time of war, we did not raise taxes. In fact, we lowered taxes for everyone. And so people talk about all of the things that together have contributed to this recession and to these difficult economic times that we're in. Certainly that plays a big part and bears a large part of the responsibility. Going forward, though, I believe that we do need to end the Bush-era tax cuts on the wealthiest Americans and preserve these tax cuts for middle-class Americans. The Bush-era tax cuts, the tax cuts and tax loopholes for our biggest corporations, our wealthiest Americans, have to come to an end in order to provide some equity and fairness in our tax code and in order to get us back on solid financial footing in this country. We don't just have a spending problem in the U.S., we also have a revenue problem. And that's evident with what's been going on in this country this past decade. We can fix it, though, by bringing an end to these tax cuts.
Thank you. Opportunity for follow-up. Terrell Clark.
Well, I think a couple things. One of the things that I meant to talk about is how critical I do think it's important to be closing the loopholes that, again, are giving incentives to companies to be laying off our neighbors and sending our jobs overseas. We did successfully negotiate that with Governor Pawlenty. It's something that we do need to keep pushing, and we need to move forward on that. I also think it's unconscionable that the banks got a huge bailout, while so many of our small businesses are really looking for a way to be expanding through cash and capital. Again, if we can find ways that they are able to do that, they are going to be able to be economic generators in our communities. Lastly, just because you brought it up, we were able to keep K-12 funding intact during the Pawlenty years. We didn't get to go where we wanted to. We continually worked to increase revenue on the most wealthy, on the millionaires and billionaires in Minnesota, so that we could make sure that we were increasing our education and keeping down property taxes. As a mom who has got two sons who are recent graduates from college, I absolutely personally know how challenging it is to be seeing what's happening with tuition. And it's critically important, if we want to be competitive in the 21st century, that we actually put our money where our mouth is. And that's something that's going to be a long-term project in Washington.
Thank you. Rick Nolan.
Yeah, Lisa, you asked, what could or should be done between now and January 1st when these revenue and spending cuts are made. I would suggest, after learning recently that the Congress that's currently in session is not planning to do anything about it, and they're considering maybe in September doing a continuing resolution to get them through the end of the year, and passing it on to the next Congress. On the one hand, I welcome that, because I think it'll give one of the three of us up here an opportunity to play an important role in that, and I'd like that. I'd like that very much. But having said that, we need a Congress that will go to work. And I'm telling you, folks, I was shocked when they go into session at 6 o'clock on Tuesday night, and they have some votes scheduled, and what they don't finish up on Tuesday night, they finish up on Wednesday, and then they go home. And, after a rigorous a couple of weeks like that, they take a week off. And then after a couple of months like that, they take a recess. These people get paid good salaries. The country's in trouble.
Thanks,
they
Rick.
need to go to work.
Thank you. Jeff Anderson.
Compromise has become a dirty word in Washington. It's something that I think Representative Cravaack embodies. He has a brand of politics, as does Michelle Bachmann and others from the Tea Party movement, where they won't work with people across the aisle to get things done. That's how we get things done, though, by people with differing views working together to move our country forward, specifically with these tax breaks, specifically with our budget. We need a representative who will work with people. As a city councilor in Duluth, as president of our city council, I worked across the aisle because we didn't have anyone to pass the buck to. We had to balance a budget at the end of the year. We had to invest in streets and infrastructure. Those couldn't be partisan issues. Those were issues that we had to come together on to get things done for our community, and it's a lesson that's needed in Washington because of the likes of Representative Cravaack, who will not compromise, who won't compromise, and thus we don't get anything done.
Thank you. We're going to shift now to a conversation around economic growth and development in Congressional District 8. Because while unemployment in Minnesota has trended slightly lower than the U.S., about half of the counties in District 8 have unemployment rates higher than the state average. What federal policies would you support to put people to work in District 8? Rick Nolan, you're up.
Thank you. There's a lot of things that could be done. I'd like to begin by introducing my wife here, Mary. And she and I have been partners in public service. Mary is an educator here for Planned Parenthood for many years, and active in the National Marrow Donor Program and the Red Cross. And by the way, I thought you were a lot younger than I am. My dad was in the Navy when I was born too, Terrell, for crying out loud.
So, good thing the Navy's been around for a while, huh?
But, you know, the things that, you know, that could be done, and by the way, my wife's family, they donated the land for the college here. They donated the land for the airport. When Chip Cravaack, first thing he did when he went to Washington was to cut essential air services for the airport here, you know. And I told the air guys, I said, I couldn't go to a family reunion, you know, if I didn't support essential air services. And they're called essential air services because they're important for the economic development in this particular region, you know, the tourism and the diversified industries that we have. That airport's just a big part of our economic development. But beyond that, we need to fund our education, and we need to fund this community college in particular. We've seen enrollments rise, we've seen cost rise, we've seen state and federal funding cut. We need to increase that funding. We need to provide funding for rapid transit. I want to see that Duluth light rail go all the way from the Twin Cities up to Duluth. And by the way, I'd like to see the North Star line go up through Little Falls and Brainerd and Walker and Bemidji and right on up to, and I'd like to see that connected with a national system as well. Forestry, we own the sawmill, or we used to own the sawmill and the pallet factory up in Emily, so our kids own it today. And little Junior said he wants to go into the family business someday too when he grows up, so we're proud of that. But we want to see a sustainable forestry industry and agriculture here for this area.
Thank you, Rick.
Am I done?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Jeff Anderson.
Thank you. Jobs and economic development in the 8th is, as far as I'm concerned, the paramount issue facing us in this campaign and facing the future of the district. I grew up in Ely, which today is a population of right around 3,300 people. My graduating class from high school in the 1990s was half the size of my dad's graduating class in the 1960s. And today the graduating class in Ely is half the size of mine in the 90s. We're going in the wrong direction. And this is common in communities all across the 8th Congressional District. We have an opportunity, though, if we have the right leaders in place, to move forward investing in job creation, investing in our natural resource-based economy, mining and timber and tourism, but also investing in manufacturing all across this district. I see ships come into the port of Duluth every day, bringing things from foreign countries, things like wind turbines that were, in many cases, made with material that we mined in northern Minnesota, shipped it off, and then had someone else build it and bring it back to this country. We should be building things like that in Brainerd. We should be building things like that in North Branch. We should be building things like that all across the 8th Congressional District using the resources that we have here. We've done this in Duluth. As president of the Duluth Economic Development Authority, I played a role in helping to lure and bring and invest in business that today are creating jobs and hiring people and expanding. We can do that if we have leadership in place that realizes you need to be a partner for communities like Brainerd and Duluth and Ely to get things done. Chip Cravaack is a go-it-alone representative. He thinks that cities like Brainerd should be left alone to do what they need to do to lure jobs and to bring manufacturers and things like that. I believe we need a strong partner in Washington, someone who is going to cheer for this district and do everything they can to create those jobs and opportunities.
Terrell Clark.
This is a critical issue throughout the whole district. I've been listening to people every day for over the last year, and what people tell me that they're worried about are not partisan issues. They are things like, can I stay in my house? Can I afford to pay our health care bills? Can I afford to retire or stay retired? Am I going to be able to expand our business, keep our job? Can I send my kids to school? Those are things that we all know about. You know, one of the things we're so proud of in this state is the strength of our communities. And as I said at the beginning, I think Washington and certainly Congressman Cravaack have absolutely forgotten about it. So there are some things we can do to reclaim those jobs that we lost, and Minnesota, and particularly the 8th District, is well positioned to be the ones leading it. We can be expanding manufacturing and retooling it. We have over 50 companies, largely through central and northeastern Minnesota, that are smaller manufacturers that would like to diversify what they're doing, but they're having trouble with cash and capital. Let's help them with that. As I said before, let's make sure we're doing smart infrastructure investment. Congressman Cravaack seems to think his whole position on transportation is quote-unquote cost containment. What that means is gutting important projects like Northern Lights Express. We need important and smart projects to be moving forward. I liken it to my mother-in-law, Wanda. She loves Triple Coupon Day. I'm a coupon clipper myself. But Triple Coupon Day, she loved because there are times that she can actually get them to give her money, not just go ahead and get a good discount. In a way, that's where we're at right now with our infrastructure. We've got low interest, we have got supply costs that are down, and we have people that we need to get back to work. So let's make sure we're focusing on those important regional projects so that we can go ahead and get people moving forward. Now, I'm proud to have the support of President Clinton. Nobody did more to help our economy and the middle class. And one of the things that both he and I have been out talking about is making sure that we're also investing in an infrastructure bank. We're really the only developed country in the world that isn't doing that.
And now we have an opportunity for follow-up. Rick Nolan.
Oh, I can finish up my laundry list here. Holy mackerel, we need broadband so that people can run their businesses from anywhere in the rural areas. And so when you're doing export trading in China, they don't know if you're in Manhattan or if you're in Emily, Minnesota. I think we need to have and maintain our strong laws and regulations protecting the environment and the air and the water. That's a big, huge part of our health. It's a big part of our tourism here in the 8th District. If we don't have healthy forests and clean lakes and clean rivers, we'll not only have lost that, which is unconscionable, we've lost a big part of our tourism industry. And beyond that, I mean, there are many roads and bridges that need fixing and municipal waste treatment facilities that need repair and upgrading. And these are all things that improve the quality of our life. They create jobs, good paying jobs, and they move us forward as a society. And that's the direction that we have to go here in the 8th and throughout the rest of the country.
Thank you, Rick. Jeff Anderson.
Thank you. Now, I may not have presidents or former presidents who support me in this race, but I do have a whole lot of elected officials, folks like our mayor in Duluth, Don Ness, former House Majority Leader Tony Sertich, Representative Tom Rukavina, a whole host of city council members and mayors from across this district who support me because they know I have been in the trenches these past few years with my sleeves rolled up working on these very important issues that are affecting our communities. One of the most important is that investment in infrastructure, which, number one, puts people to work right away, but it helps us to build new roads, new bridges, and those things that you don't see that are under the streets, the sewers, the infrastructure that people don't think of as infrastructure, like high-speed internet connecting parts of the rural 8th Congressional District, which contributes to economic development. All of these things are important pieces of the puzzle in creating jobs and putting people to work.
Thank you. Terrell Clark.
So just quickly on the infrastructure bank, the way it works is you have both private and public funds so that you can leverage funds a lot better. If you think about it, the so-called new Stillwater Bridge is going to cost $300 million. That's $300 million that is going to be going into projects throughout the whole 8th District. We have 122 bridges just in St. Louis County alone that need to be repaired or replaced. We need to find good creative ways to be growing those jobs and opportunities. I also think rural health is a really critical piece. We're really at risk right now about whether or not we're going to be able to keep many of our hospitals. whether or not we're going to have long-term care facilities for our seniors and for people who are disabled, about whether or not we're actually going to be able to get dental work or see our doctors. So it's a really critical piece that we are able to have that, because we all know we are not going to be able to be drawing people to our communities unless we have that health care piece as well. Lastly, I do think we need to be cutting red tape. We can do it smart. I know it says I have to stop, so we'll talk more about that in a bit.
Okay. Each of you touched on infrastructure in the previous questions, so we'll give you an opportunity to talk more about it, because in greater Minnesota, transportation is crucial to economic development and quality of life. Having access to air service serves the communities and the economies of our rural areas, as do highway and road systems to move people and products. So what role does the federal government play in maintaining rural transportation infrastructure? And you've touched on a variety of things earlier, but how would you plan to finance it? And we'll start first with Jeff.
Well, the federal government does provide state governments with a large amount of grants in terms of infrastructure investment, and that's important. I think that the federal government needs to play more of a role in providing us with these grants and investments in infrastructure, especially in a state like Minnesota, where the 2 terms of Governor Pawlenty saw little or no investment in infrastructure. I can tell you about Highway 169 between Virginia and Ely, one of the deadliest 2-lane stretches of road in the state of Minnesota that we continue to fight over, even though we do have some federal dollars that are available to help fix it. Investment in infrastructure creates jobs, and it connects our communities, which is going to be increasingly important in the 8th Congressional District and in Minnesota if we're going to be investing in that manufacturing. I talk about the next generation of Minnesota prosperity, northern Minnesota prosperity that's out there, but it is dependent upon us investing in these key areas like manufacturing and in our natural resource-based economy, and then making sure we can transport our products and things of that nature to other markets. We do that in Duluth with the port, a port that's underutilized. We need to invest in the Northern Lights Express, which will also carry products, not just people. These are things that Representative Cravaack and Tea Partiers in Washington have continued to view as not being necessities. They are necessities, and when you live in this part of the state, when you live in rural Minnesota, you know how necessary that connectivity is. I touched earlier on infrastructure like high-speed internet. Incredibly important towards economic development, home-based businesses, and communities luring other businesses and manufacturers to them to create jobs. We need to also invest in that type of electronic infrastructure for the 21st century.
Thank you. Terrell.
Well, I mentioned a few things. An infrastructure bank would be a part of it. Let's face it, I think most of us know we're sending way more of our money to Washington than we're getting back. And I think part of my job is going to be to make sure that we're getting more of our hard-earned tax dollars back to be building the important projects we have. We can continue to work on that without actually even changing the transportation budget. But I also think that the original stimulus bill, while it did do a lot of good, was way too light on infrastructure. And I think that it's time, as I said earlier, that we are reinvesting right now, because we can be putting millions, literally millions of people across the country back to work. And whether it's the ports, whether it's our busiest North American rail crossing in Rainier, whether it's making sure our bridges and our highways are working, or frankly improving funding for our rural transit, we've got an opportunity right now to be changing what we are doing. I also think that it's critically important that we're thinking again about how manufacturing plays into this. In the Duluth area, we have an awful lot of aviation manufacturing that goes on. Let's think about across our region about what we can do to be increasing supply chain manufacturing. So while we're building those roads and bridges and helping expand that infrastructure, we're also building our communities at the same time.
Thank you. Rick Nolan.
Jeff and Terrell, I'm so impressed with the way you guys fight so hard for Duluth, and I appreciate that, because I fight hard for Duluth too. But I want to remind you, in addition to that, the Northern Lights Rail going up to Duluth, Don't forget about the North Star line that can come up through Brainerd and through our area as well.
It's nice of you to point out that I worked on it.
Yeah, well, it's good. It's too bad you didn't fund it, but
Oh, we did. Got early money so far.
aside from that, in answer to your question, I've made it clear I do intend to go on the Transportation Committee and Public Works Committee, because I really think that's a big part of where our future is here in this country. And as to how it's funded, you know, the Essential Air Services is funded by a small tax on the airline tickets. And they said that by Cravaack holding up that legislation and not reauthorizing the FAA authorization, we lost more money for airport construction and maintenance in one day than the Essential Air Services program cost for the whole country. So you wonder where that money went? Well, guess what? It was a nice little windfall for Delta Airlines, going into the hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's one of the ways that you fund it. You fund it with gas taxes. My dream, quite frankly, and I've studied the issue, the cost of expanding all the airports in the country, making them bigger mass transit facilities compared to the cost of developing a rapid rail transit system connecting all of our cities, and from there spokes going out to our smaller towns. It's much cheaper to build a national rail transportation system. It's safer. It consumes less energy. It's more environmentally friendly. That's my dream. That's what I want to work on, among other things, and that's why I want to be on the Transportation Committee.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up, Jeff Anderson?
Well, I share Rick's zeal for railroad transportation. It is incredibly important, and we should be investing in that all across the 8th Congressional District. This is a big piece of land, the 8th Congressional District, that could be connected by rail, that should be. But unfortunately, we don't have a congressman that is supportive of those types of projects. We pay for them through things that have been mentioned, from the gas tax to taxes on airline tickets and things of that nature, but also coming back to the big issue of the day, which is tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. It's tax loopholes for corporations. It's subsidies for big oil and things that we do to benefit Wall Street bigwigs. These are things, and these are dollars, most importantly, that could be invested into public infrastructure, into public transportation. These are things that don't require us to raise taxes on the middle class and the people in this room, but they're common sense ways where we can find dollars to help fund much needed projects right here at home and across this country.
Thank you. Terrell Clark?
You know, when the legislature couldn't get an agreement with Governor Pawlenty on transportation, we partnered with the chamber, we partnered with labor and others, and we overrode him. And it's possible that we are going to have to keep working to bring more and more people to the table so that we do have business, that we do have labor, that we have our community organizations together so that we can get the resources that we need in Washington. These are our communities. And frankly, Washington's forgotten about rural America. And we have an opportunity in this district to keep moving forward. Now, the sole reason why we have the North Star Rail as far as it is because regular people, seniors, people who are advocating for jobs and communities, were able to keep pushing for over 10 years. We need to finish that line. We need to get Northern Lights Express, but we also have to have all of you in this room and others to keep reaching out, raising our voices together, because any one of us is not enough. And when we see what happened next door in Wisconsin, when the Governor Walker there said no to rail, fast, high-speed rail there, that affected us.
Rick Nolan.
With regard to transportation, I do want you to know I have been for years and remain chairman of that all-powerful committee known as the Mission Township Planning Committee. And but I do want you to know we got every road in the township paved. We got all the bridges rebuilt. We have a wonderful community center with a baseball field, a basketball court, and a tennis court, and it's all paid for, and we're real proud of it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to move on to education now. I see some educators in the audience, and we want to talk about No Child Left Behind. It attempted to hold the educational system accountable for educating all by having students meet a state-determined proficiency level for state-designed standards in math, reading, language, arts, and science. When students didn't meet the proficiency levels for more than 2 years, Tutoring and a choice of another school were mandated by the U.S. Department of Education, and a backlash followed when too many students in schools didn't meet the proficiency levels. What do you believe is the role of the federal government in assuring that all students are expected to be taught to standards that help them meet a strong proficiency level, especially since so many countries have improved their educational systems and in some cases surpassed the educational achievement of even our most talented students? We'll start first with Terrell Clark.
Well, certainly as a mom, as a community volunteer, as someone who's done a lot of work, both volunteering in the schools, as has my husband Doug, and working on this issue legislatively, these are critical issues. And I figure Congress, you ought to be able to be on more than one committee. So I hope to be on transportation and on the committee that deals with education and healthcare and those other important issues. First off, I think we need to be better investing our early resources in early education. Done a lot of work working with Head Start, with ECFE and others. We have done some wonderful things in our state, but frankly, it really hasn't been since Governor Carlson, since we've made the real investments. And we only have to go a little further north to Grand Rapids to see some really incredible outcomes in the Invest Early effort that's happening there. You may or may not know it, but there's 1,800 performance standards for Head Start alone. 1,800 for an early childhood and anti-poverty program. We can change that. So first off, I think we need to invest there, be more wise there. Second, I think NCLB either needs to be tossed out or significantly reformed. I'm glad Governor Dayton did the waiver. We couldn't get Governor Pawlenty to do it. I'm currently also, frankly, worried a little bit with Race to the Top because I'm not sure that our kids and our schools that need it most are going to get the resources where they need it. I think we need to make sure that the federal government gets out of the way so our teachers can teach and our kids can learn. We have been promised special ed funding for forever. We're not seeing it. And that's something I want to go and advocate for. STEM funding, science, technology, engineering, math, all the way from elementary through high school, and making sure that, frankly, college is affordable. Those are the kinds of things that we can do. We are going backwards right now. It still looks like we're leading in a lot of ways, but we know that we have to make sure that we have the resources and that our teachers really can do the work that's most important in moving us forward.
Thank you. Rick Nolan?
Education is something I've seen at many levels. I was the Head Start director for Morrison, Crow Wing, and Todd counties, 19-unit Head Start programs. I set up the adult basic education program for Little Falls. I taught junior and senior high school in Royalton, Minnesota. As I mentioned earlier, immediate past president of the Central Lakes College Foundation. Here we raise scholarship money for people of all ages. And obviously education is something that I've seen at every level, and that's very important to me. And in my judgment, there's nothing more important than the education of our people and all people at all ages. I quite frankly have strong disagreement with the No Child Left Behind. I think it's resulted in a system of education where you're teaching to the test, and I have no problem with tests. We had tests going back to the beginning of public education. That's not a problem. The problem is attaching funding to the test and teachers teaching to the test as opposed to teaching creative intelligence and understanding and questioning and developing a broadly based education. And to do that, it takes money. And we have to fund our educational systems. We have to fund our universities. We have to fund our preschool. It not only is the right thing to do to see to it that everybody has a full opportunity to realize their full potential, whatever that is, if that's not a good enough reason for you, just crass economics. You know, you give a child a good education in their youth, and you don't have to worry about them later in life. Our prisons are full of kids that had learning disabilities. Our social welfare rolls are full of people with learning disabilities that could have been corrected. Yeah, we had the good wisdom, the good intelligence to step up, spend the money, and get them corrected at an early age. And that's the direction we need to go with our education.
Thank you. Jeff Anderson.
For the past 18 years, I've taken a group of high school students from Ely High School out to Washington, D.C. and given them a tour of our nation's capital. I've taken over 1,000 kids and their parents and teachers from that area, and I get to spend time with teachers for 5 days each and every year. And the topic of conversation for the last decade, every time we're on the road, revolves around No Child Left Behind, and what it's putting that school district in Ely and school districts all across the 8th Congressional District and teachers through. I mean, let's face it, the state of Minnesota is really and local funding sources are the largest pots of money for our school districts. The federal government does not contribute as much money, yet there's a whole lot of strings that come with the money that they give. And as it's been said here today, those dollars come with strings that have to do with performance and teachers who are teaching to the test rather than teaching people lifelong skills and preparing them for the workforce, preparing them for college. When I was a kid, we were told all the time that Minnesota had the best schools in the country, and we don't say that anymore, which is sad. And it's a big part of that is the responsibility of our state legislature and state leaders. But we need to be investing in not just the basics of math and English and science in our schools, but we need to make sure we're investing in the arts and in music and in shop class so that if kids who are not prepared or wanting to go to a 4-year college or a 2-year college, they have some skills to be able to go into the workforce, whether that's working at a mine, whether that's working in manufacturing. They should have some basic skills that they learn in our high schools. And unfortunately today, because of mandates from the federal government and a lack of funding from both the federal government and state government, it's challenging for our educators to be able to do that.
Thank you. Follow-up, Terrell Clark.
Well, I think this is certainly one of the things that we all ought to be concerned about where some in this Congress, including our current congressman, is going. I am a strong supporter of public education. I'm concerned that he is going in the direction of vouchers. And let's face it, this is about making sure we're strengthening public education. Jeff alluded to this, but we really have had 2 compacts with each other throughout Minnesota. One is that regardless of where you live, you should be able to get good basic services so we can have a strong community. And the other is that you should be able to get a good education. We know how to do that. Now, we need to make sure that we have somebody in Washington that understands that the federal government mucking it up, whether taking funding away or redirecting it into vouchers or putting too many extra rules on, is wrong. That does take away from our ability to really prepare our kids for the future.
Rick Nolan.
Well, yeah, and we need to remind ourselves the important role that government has played in funding education, not just elementary and secondary, but at every level. The Veterans Education Program that the veterans received after World War II just thrust this country into unparalleled economic prosperity, the likes of which the world has never seen. And there's nothing more fundamental to the survival and the growth and the vitality of a democratic society than its educational system. And you can't get by on the cheap. And you know, Jeff pointed out here, when Plenty became governor, we had the best education system in the United States, and Plenty came and said, "Oh, we don't need to be the best, you know, just okay is good enough." Well, as far as the 3 of us are concerned up here, okay isn't good enough. We want to be the best. Why not?
Jeff Anderson.
We need to continue to invest in education, but let's talk about teachers for a moment too, and the fact that in this country today and over the recent few years, our teachers are being attacked. We already don't pay our teachers enough. We already don't invest in our educators enough, and we have people with the same political ideology that Chip Cravaack has that are attacking our teachers' basic collective bargaining rights and stripping them of those rights. Making it so that people don't want to or can't go into that particular profession. That's not what we should be doing. We need to be making teaching an honorable, lucrative career that people want to go into and will be financially rewarded. We want the best and brightest teaching our children. We don't get that by attacking teachers. We don't get that by attacking their bargaining rights. That's not how we go about strengthening education from the end of our educators.
Well, we've touched on K-12. Now we're going to touch on higher education, and I can't think of a better person to ask the question than my moderator partner to my right, Steve Sabin, who's currently a student at CLC and president of the Minnesota State College Student Association. So I'll turn to Steve for this next question.
Thank you, Lisa. Many students at CLC, including myself, access financial aid to attend post-secondary education through Pell Grants for low-income students and student loans. Recently, the loan rates were to double, but Congress temporarily kept the rates at their current level, which I was actually fortunate enough to travel to Washington and DC and see President Obama sign that legislation. The question for you is, do you think Congress should continue to keep the loan rates at their current level? And if so, how would you propose to pay for this subsidy?
Rick Nolan, you're up first.
Well, I think it's outrageous that the Congress would allow these loan rates to increase at the rates that they're talking about. And, you know, at the risk of sounding a little bit like a broken record, but I implore my public that I live and work with, to start connecting the dots. The entire student loan debt in this country is approximately equal to the cost of the war in Iraq. So at the end of the day, it gets around to priorities. Now, our congressman, as many of you know, is a graduate of the Naval Academy. God bless him. I appointed a few kids to the academy myself in years past. It's considered to be $1 million education. That's the value of that. And one of the first things he did when he got into Congress was to vote to cut Pell Grants for poor kids to go to college. Now, if those are the kind of priorities that we want in this district, then we'll re-elect Congressman Chip Cravaack. I submit those are not the kind of priorities that we want in this country. We simply have to step up to the plate, reorder our priorities, and start funding what's important. In this particular case, education.
Thank you. Jeff Anderson?
I am someone who attended college and helped pay for it with a Pell Grant. I'm someone who helped pay for college by serving in the Minnesota Army National Guard and relying on the GI Bill and tuition reimbursement. My family didn't have the money to just write a check for me to attend UMD and to further my education. I had to work for it. I had to work and rely on help from the government, both at the federal level and the state level. I was someone who was able to find a good job and to stay in northern Minnesota, and I believe to be a productive and contributing member of our society here in the 8th Congressional District. But I needed help, and so many kids need help. They need help to elevate themselves, to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. The boots, though, are the Pell Grants. They're the student loans. They're the help that we put forward, and we need leadership in Washington. Again, that represents the values of the people of the 8th Congressional District who believe that that is true, not somebody who's going to cut them. Rick talked about Representative Cravaack's education at the Naval Academy. That's a pretty good deal. I have to thank the state of Minnesota and the Minnesota Army National Guard for helping me to be able to go to college. But I made that commitment and served for 6 years in order to be able to take advantage of those benefits. We need more access to those types of assistance to pay for college for kids all across the 8th Congressional District, to kids all across northern Minnesota. While college may not be for everybody, we want to prepare our kids to go to college and to be able to then find a job here in northern Minnesota, to stay here so that our communities grow again instead of continuing to shrink. Having leaders like Chip Cravaack in Washington, though, that's not going to get us there.
Terrell Clark?
So probably like some of you sitting here today or listening, if it wasn't for financial aid, I couldn't have gone to school. My parents, at the time I was looking at colleges, I am the oldest in my family, I have 3 younger brothers, they were realtors, and it was one of those times that, in our household it was either feast or famine, and it was definitely one of those real hardship times. There was no money for me to go to school. And so I worked hard between work, study, working outside in the summer and through the school year, getting scholarships. The financial aid was critical. Pell Grants saved us, and so did student loans. And you go fast forward, frankly, student financial aid hasn't kept up with inflation. I think one of the things, in addition to the question about student loans, is that we need to make sure that aid is indexed so that if we go back to even when I went to school, which was a while ago, that more middle-class families can actually get access. Right now, for so many families, if you have two parents that are working, you don't qualify. And that's a real burden both on the family and it's a real burden on the students. We are seeing more debt right now. And what's wrong with this picture? We are so proud of the place that we've held economically in the world, and yet we are now putting our kids in a real precarious situation. So one, yes, I do think we should be keeping that down. I was actually at Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College during finals, and some students took some time off in between their tests to say, help us understand what business model is this good for? Well, it's not. It's not a good business model. It's purely political. And when you ask how would we pay for it in the bigger scheme, this is the kind of thing that absolutely people of goodwill can get together. So I'm not going to tell you a specific item because I actually think within the budget, Terry, at line items, it can be worked out. But one of the things I've learned is you've got to get the people there to try to be creative so you can actually get to yes instead of just saying, I said yes and you said yes, but you really point fingers at each other.
Okay, thank you. The only thing standing between the audience and their questions is your follow-up response. So, Rick Nolan, your follow-up?
On this question, okay. You know, it costs $7,000 a year now to go to the community college and live at home. And the university expenses are far greater than that. And meanwhile, we've seen a 30-year decline in income. And the numbers just don't work. We're pricing advanced post-secondary education out of the reach of the ordinary person. I grew up in this town. My house just sold recently, the house I grew up in, for $26,000. I mean, I know guys that have paid more than that for their fish houses. You know, we didn't really have any money, but you know what? Our parents told us we were rich. And you know why? Because we had a world of opportunity. The community stood by us. They gave us the best education that we could step up, and as a result of it, we had great opportunities. We need to restore that sense of community and that kind of commitment to education.
Jeff Anderson?
We've got to have that conversation about education and where we're going in this country because the costs are spiraling out of control. It has to happen not only at the federal level, but also here in the state of Minnesota, in the state legislature and with the governor. No one graduating from college should be burdened with $50,000 or $100,000 or more in debt, and to try and come out from that and make a life for yourself and to contribute and be a productive member of the middle class. You're starting out at a complete disadvantage. We have to have that conversation about where we go and how we reshape education in this country, not just with K through 12, but our post-secondary education. Whether it's a 4-year institution, vocational school, a 2-year school, we need to have that conversation now. It's one of the most important issues facing not just this district, but the country. And leaders like Representative Cravaack are not going to get us there.
Terrell Clark.
Well, I think about our two sons, Colin and Nathan, who are now in their mid-20s, and even though we worked really hard to keep their debt down, they both have some debt. In addition, we have many, many young people, including themselves, that are finding it hard to have the kind of jobs that they've been trained for. We're both very thankful that they have jobs. One of them doesn't have health care, though, so it's a good thing the Affordable Care Act passed because he's able to still get health care through our health insurance. But right now we're at danger of having a generation of young adults that are well-trained, wanting to serve, and make sure that they are able to earn money that can't find good jobs. So I think to me it kind of also goes back to let's make sure that we're getting our economy going, having government be a catalyst to growing jobs so we can end up having these young adults be able to be really good, productive citizens in our society.
Thank you. That concludes that portion of the event. And now we're on to your questions from the audience. And Steve Sabin has been reviewing your questions and has a variety of questions to ask. And we'll start with the first question addressed to Jeff Anderson.
Okay, this question comes from Luen in Baxter. What are your views of staying in Afghanistan?
And again, we have 1 minute. This is a rapid fire section. 1 minute, no follow-up.
I think we need to get out of Afghanistan and start investing in this country. We've been building roads and bridges and new schools all across the globe for the past decade, and we need to start doing it here at home.
Terrell Clark.
One, it's a darn good thing we're out of Iraq. Obviously, a war we never should have been in. In Afghanistan, well, we've got a timetable in front of us. I believe we should be getting out of there as fast as we absolutely can so we can bring our men and our women, our mothers and our fathers back home as quickly and safely as possible. I think that President Bush lost the eye on what the mission was. The mission has been accomplished. It's time to be making sure that we can get our people back home.
Thank you. Rick Nolan.
Yeah, you know, I kind of reject the argument that we should get out of there as fast as we can. For John McCain, that means another 10, 15 years. I think we need to get out of the war now. I was against the war in Iraq. I was against the war in Afghanistan. I protested here in the streets with many of you I see here in the audience, and we did everything we could to try to stop them, and we failed. I was involved in the... time's up.
Thank you. Next question.
Next question comes from Sarah in Duluth. What will you do to maintain or increase Pell Grant funding?
Terrell Clark.
Well, I'm going to co-sponsor it, if not be the sponsor. I'm guessing there's already somebody who's there. Again, as a mom, as somebody who's worked in communities, I know how important it is. That is one of the pieces that the federal government can do.
Rick Nolan.
Yeah, I'll do everything I can to increase funding for Pell Grants.
I'd like to stop subsidizing some oil companies and start subsidizing some young people to go to college. And I think that's exactly what we do in regards to supporting and strengthening Pell Grants.
Okay.
Okay. Next question comes from Nick and Baxter. What is your stance on same-sex marriage?
Rick Nolan.
I support it.
I support marriage equality.
Terrell Clark.
I believe people should have the freedom to marry the person that they love. And frankly, if there had been a law in place that had prohibited Doug and I from marrying, it would have been devastating. It took us long enough to figure out how to get together, get past our fears of rooting a friendship. We should be making sure that in America you can go ahead and have the freedom to marry the person you love.
Okay, thank you.
Next question comes from Roland and looks like Bruno. Do you support any limits of the possession or purchase of any type of firearms, ammunitions, or magazines?
Jeff Anderson.
And I'm a hunter myself. I've had a conceal and carry permit. I'm a veteran. I support Second Amendment rights, but we need to do whatever we can to keep these firearms out of the hands of criminals and people with mental health issues. We've seen so much violence just in recent weeks, and I think that the conversation needs to be had. You know, when a plane crashes or we have a corrupt bankers on Wall Street, we have a conversation about how we move from there and make reforms and do things better. When it comes to gun violence in this country, people automatically get, they're ready for a fight. We can't even have the conversation, and we need to have the conversation to do sensible things to keep these firearms out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them.
Terrell Clark.
Well, first off, I think it's important that we do uphold our Second Amendment rights. Hunting is a really big and important part of who we are as Minnesotans. We also should be thinking about crime control. First and foremost, I think we need to be enforcing the laws we have on the books. We should be making sure that our guns legally at least don't get into the hands of terrorists, of people who have significant mental health issues. We also know that there's people who really enjoy shooting at gun clubs or at ranges. And I absolutely support going back to the common sense laws that were done on assault weapons during President Reagan. But perhaps also a common sense compromise could be is if you're a member of a gun club, if you want to be shooting more rounds, that's a place that you could do it.
Rick Nolan.
Yeah, no, I think we should outlaw assault rifles. I don't need one to shoot a duck. And I don't think people need to be bringing them to the movies and the theaters. And I see some friends in the audience that might quarrel whether or not I need a 100-round magazine to shoot a duck or not. But quite frankly, I don't think I need one. There's a number of things that we could do. I was reading up on 50 caliber shells. I mean, my God, they're 30 pounds. You know, if you shot a deer with it, Ronnie, you'd have to just you'd have your hamburger made already. You know, there's a number of things that we can do, and I believe in Second Amendment rights, and so does my wife. If you ever saw her in her nightie, chasing across the yard with a shotgun, chasing the varmints out of our garden, why, you'd know why we have to have those weapons. As I said to a good friend of mine one day, you know, a porcupine climbs up a 300-year-old pine tree, one of them's going to be dead at the end of the day. If it happens to be in our yard, it's going to be the porcupine, not my tree.
Thank you.
Next question comes from Shannon in Cambridge. Minnesota public colleges pay the third highest tuition in the country. What will you do to help solve this problem?
Terrell Clark.
Well, the piece that the federal government can be doing is going back to financial aid, certainly helping with continuing research and development, making sure that there are real opportunities. This is a problem throughout our country. When budget deficits get hard in states, tuition, it gets shifted over to tuition to students, and that's wrong. We've gone from having the expectation, and frankly still on the books, that students would pay about a third and the state would be picking up the rest. And the problem is we've gone to almost the opposite extreme. So I think if we can index, like I said before, on financial aid, make sure that we are funding it adequately, which it is underfunded right now, and then making sure we have additional opportunities for our students so that they're not having to go into debt in the way they are now.
Rick Nolan.
I would strongly suggest, in answer to this question, that we elect Tay Stevenson to the Senate, Joe Radinovich and John Ward to the State House, and other DFLers to properly fund education.
Okay. Jeff
Hear, hear.
Anderson.
Certainly, what's been said, I agree wholeheartedly with. However, I think we also need to invest in and strengthen programs like AmeriCorps and VISTA, where if people are willing to serve, we help them pay for their education, especially in a time where we have a down economy, where jobs, where we need to create more jobs, where there's a lack of opportunity. We should be investing in and strengthening those types of programs to help these people pay for their schooling and give back in our communities here in the 8th Congressional District and across the country.
Thank you.
Next question. How do you feel about the proposed expansion of mining in northeast Minnesota?
Rick Nolan.
Well, mining is a big part of who we are and what we do as our forestry and tourism. And we're sitting on some of the world's largest reserves of both ferrous and non-ferrous material, many of which are very valuable and very essential for the future of our economy. But one of the differences between us and Democrats and Republicans is that we, at least I and myself, insist that it has to be done in a way that is environmentally safe, protecting our air and our water, protecting the health and the safety of our workers, ensuring that the companies pay the kind of royalties that they've had to pay in the past, and insisting that they protect workers' rights in the process as well. As Jeff and Terrell have both pointed out, we had steel workers that lost their pensions while Wall Street people were getting their bonuses. We have to insist on good, strong rules and regulations and then advance this industry along with our other economic opportunities, but do it in a way that's responsible.
Jeff Anderson.
We've been mining in northern Minnesota for 130 years. I believe we can be doing it for another 130 years and doing it safely, creating literally thousands of jobs, not just on the Iron Range, but again, across this district, if we also invest in manufacturing and using those minerals, those metals that we take from the ground in northern Minnesota and use them here across the 8th Congressional District. Again, I believe we can do them safely. I am wholeheartedly in support of the expansion of these projects. And I don't believe that it's a matter of if, I believe it's a matter of when. We sit on the second largest reserve in the world of copper and nickel and palladium. And we can go and get them. We can do it safe. We can put people to work and enjoy the economic benefits of these mining jobs while also protecting our environment.
Terrell Clark.
Well, as has been said, clearly mining has been a big part of our economy, certainly part of our way of life, and we've learned a lot. We are obviously still cleaning up from some things we didn't know about 100 years ago, which is partially why so many people are very concerned right now. I think the right has sold us a bill of goods They've told us that we can have job creation or we can have an environment. We know better. We can have both, and we should expect both. We want to be able to eat the fish we catch. We certainly want to be able to have the jobs that will make a difference. So I think it's critically important that, that we are able to show that this can be done in a safe and sustainable way. Certainly PolyMed has told me that they believe that they can meet the current standards that are there, and they need to be able to demonstrate in a scientific way so that people can see it. We have not even seen the environmental impact standard, and it's understandable that people have concerns. But imagine if we're able to show that we can do this right, we can be the leader in the 21st century, not just in our country, but globally, about how to be doing mining in a safe and sustainable way.
Okay. Next question is, what economic growth initiatives would you champion specific to District 8?
Jeff Anderson.
Well, going back to our natural resource-based economy, we log in the 8th Congressional District. We mine in the 8th Congressional District. We use our environment to attract tourists to areas like Brainerd and areas like where I grew up in Ely. We need to invest in those things. We can create thousands of jobs in our mining industry if we safely invest in the expansion of that mining. And then we invest in manufacturing. We've done this in Duluth. I've done it as an economic development commissioner, working with a unit of government and working with private industry as partners to create opportunities for people.
Terrell Clark.
We have such diverse economic opportunities and challenges around this district, and we certainly want to keep building off of what is already working. But I think really government can end up being a catalyst to help with incentives to be able to grow jobs. Let's face it, Wall Street got bailed out, Main Street didn't. We need to make sure that we are having opportunities through the big banks so that our local businesses can get access to cash and capital again. I was up in Boise Cascade and International Falls early this morning at shift change and got a chance once again to be talking to people about the jobs that they're having now, what they're worried about for the future. We know that we've got steel companies that are negotiating right now or attempting to negotiate really bad deals for our workers. So we need to both keep our current jobs in place, but I do think that part of what we can do is make sure that we've got the infrastructure, including broadband, high speed, so that it doesn't matter where you live, that we can locate our jobs throughout the region.
Rick Nolan.
Yeah, we are somewhat of a unique congressional district if you look at them all around the rest of the country. I mean, we are about mining and forestry and hunting and fishing and tourism, and we have the great seaport up there in Duluth. And we need to be attentive to all those natural resource-based businesses and industries, in addition to the diversified manufacturing that seems to be important as well in our region. That, along with transportation, infrastructure, and education, like the rest of the country, are where we need to focus and where we need to go for the future.
Thank you. Our last audience question.
What is your position on immigration reform at the federal level?
Terrell Clark.
I think we need to be tough, fair, and practical. I support what the president has just done for our younger people who have been brought here when they were young kids, that if they're working hard and they're going to school, that they're able to take part in the American dream. It's something we worked on bipartisanly in the legislature. I think we have a lot of places to go. As someone who has lived by both a southern border and a northern border, our issues tend to be very different. Again, as I said, I was at International Falls again today, and what we can be doing to be making sure we're both securing our mutual interests with our Canadian partners economically and otherwise is very different than some of the real challenges that we are facing in the southern part of our border. So let's make sure we're securing our borders. Let's make sure that we are figuring out good solutions for the people who are here, and let's make sure that we're fair about it as we're moving forward.
Rick Nolan.
Yeah, it's a tough issue. First of all, we have to find a path forward for citizenship for all the illegal immigrants that are here now. Having said that, however, we have to do something about the massive flow of immigrants. As the owner of a pallet factory, I can tell you, you can go into many pallet factories around the country. If you announce that you're from the Immigration and Naturalization Service, people will be flying out the doors and the windows. And the fact is that a lot of these illegal immigrants have been used to drive down labor wages. They've been used to combat collective bargaining rights that have strengthened wages and benefits. So we need to find a way to get control of this, and there is a way. I mean, the immigrants who come here, they come here for the jobs. And if you want to really fix this problem, you don't have to build a big fence at your border. You just have to put some really strong penalties against the employers who hire the illegal immigrants, and then you'll fix the problem.
Jeff Anderson.
I too support the president's recent actions in regards to immigration. We have to be firm. We have to be fair, though, and making sure that, again, that path to citizenship does exist for people is there. Making sure that that young people who are either here illegally or who are born here to illegal aliens somehow also have a way to create opportunity in their lives here in this country is important. And then to hold our employers accountable when they're hiring illegal immigrants. It's a sensitive situation. It's a tough situation, and it's one I think that a lot of folks here in northern Minnesota, because of our roots and the fact that we're here through legal and sometimes illegal immigration is important. My family came from Finland in the 1880s, and here we are still and being productive members of this congressional district of the Iron Range of Minnesota.
Okay, Steve, thank you for facilitating that part of our program, and thank you to the audience for your questions. I know there was a 2-inch stack of questions, and we didn't get to all of your questions, unfortunately, but I'm sure the candidates would be happy to talk with you separately. Before we go on to your 1-minute closing statements, I just want to acknowledge that this debate is made possible through the financial support of the Otto Bremer Foundation and the Target Corporation. We'd also like to thank Minnesota State College and University System and Central Lakes College especially for supporting Debate Minnesota's mission tonight. A special thanks to all of our student volunteers. You saw them throughout with their student volunteer name tags who are here from the Minnesota State College Student Association, to Minnesota Public Radio for your broadcast, the uptake for the live streaming online, and of course our other TV, radio, print media, as well as bloggers and tweeters that are here in the audience that I saw on the phones. So most importantly, we want to thank you and the audience for being a part of today's debate, for attending, for listening in, and watching from home. And our first closing statement will now go to Rick Nolan.
Well, thank you. I must tell you that I'd like to begin by thanking Jeff and Terrell. I think this is one of our final debates here before the primary, and I want to thank both of you for a very engaging and civil and energetic campaign. It's been a pleasure to get to know you both better and be on the campaign trail with you. I must tell you that in my judgment, the country's in trouble. We're at a tipping point. We need to fix things. We need to fix them now. We need to roll up our sleeves. We need to get things done. And I must tell you that by virtue of my experience in business and elective office and volunteer community service and family, I feel better prepared for this challenge than at any point in my life. I believe I can make a difference, and so I'm here to ask for your help. I'm here to ask for your support on August 14th, because I believe with all my heart we can get this country turned around, get it back on track, and restore the dream and the promise of America. Thank you.
Jeff Anderson.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to speak on these very important issues of the day. In the past 24 hours, I was very pleased to receive the endorsements of 2 of the largest newspapers in this district, the Mesabi Daily News and the Duluth News Tribune. They both spoke not just about issues and my position on issues, but they spoke about a style. And I bring with me a style of leadership that believes we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, that we need to do more listening. And I'm a leader who has been in the trenches these past many years at a local level with my sleeves rolled up, working hard to make life in my community and in northern Minnesota better, to improve the quality of life. This is an election that is about jobs and the economy, and I will work hard every day to make sure we create those opportunities for young people and people of all ages here in the district, and I ask for your vote on August 14th. Thank you.
Terrell Clark.
I want to thank you all again, and certainly also both Rick and Jeff as well. I really do believe our country is on a precipice. A couple of years ago, I thought we were at a crossroads. I think we are at a precipice, and our democracy is at stake. But we are the antidote. We may have the Koch brothers, Stanley Hubbard, the U.S. Chamber, and others out there supporting Congressman Cravaack. But what we know in Minnesota is we know that when times are tough, we pull together. We know how to make that difference. And I think Washington could use a little bit more of Minnesota there. I've worked, as I said, throughout this whole region for going on 25 years now. I've listened to people, I've worked with people. I know the solutions and the gaps. I know that together, being persistent, we can really change things. I want to be your advocate and your partner, and I ask for your vote on August 14th. Thank you so much again.
Well, that ends our debate, and it's now your opportunity for a large round of applause.